Good day, my fellow Canadians. Consequences. When I was a child, we were taught consequences. If you used inappropriate language at the dinner table, children testing their limits, you'd get a smack across the face or a smack across the head, and it hurt. Consequences. If you misbehaved at school, you would get the strap. And when you got home, you would get the strap again for embarrassing the family and for misbehaving at school. Consequences. There's a quote I'd like to share with you. It's one of my personal favorites. Good judgment is often the result of bad experience, which is the result of bad judgment. So you learn consequences. And there were positive consequences as well. You went the extra yard, you would get a hug and a kiss from mom or dad, maybe something extra in your allowance. Consequences, good consequences. You misbehaved at the store, and your mother would turn to you and say, "You're going to get a spanking when you get home." Consequences. And when you got home, you got a spanking, and it hurt. I don't care what the pundits say. I don't care about the new age psychology and all that garbage. At the end of the day, very simple, basic truism. Pain is a great educator. I'll tell you a little story. Years back, I'd made a nice dish baked in the oven in one of those clear Pyrex baking dishes. Just for anybody watching this, a little fact you might wish to bear in mind. Hot glass looks exactly the same as cold glass. Anyways, I put on the oven mitts, I pulled it out of the oven, I put it on top of the stove, I got the dishes, I was serving it, I took the oven mitts off, I put them away. And as I'm serving, the Pyrex dish starts to slide. Without thinking, I grab the handle to stop it from sliding. I burned my fingers. Not badly, but I burned my fingers. Consequences. I was washing the kitchen floor one day, and I was out of balance. I put my hand on top of the stove to help myself up. I didn't realize I'd left the burner on low, thank God, but I had these nice concentric circles on my hand. Consequences. Did I ever wash the floor and not make sure that the burners were turned off? Nope. Painful consequences taught me a lesson. Same thing with the Pyrex dish. Painful consequences teach you a lesson. Getting the spanking as a child. Painful consequences teach you a lesson. So where I'm going with this, consequences. Because we learned consequences, and consequences were for disobedience. You learned respect for your elders, respect for veterans, respect for the rule of law. Because failure to respect these things, disrespect to an elder in front of your parents, would get you a spanking or get you the strap. Consequences. Disrespect, embarrass your parents, disrespect for the law would get you punished. Consequences. It made us, as people generally, better citizens. I'd like to do a little aside here for those who say there is no reason to exercise corporal punishment. There is no reason. I heard this once. How dare you beat a child? And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, what a life you must have lived. And good for you that you can't distinguish between the normal course of healthy discipline. Like I said, pain is a great educator. And you can't distinguish between the healthy course of normal, loving, caring discipline and a beating. Now, I agree there is no reason on God's green earth to beat a child. And trust me, I know the difference between a beating and painful discipline. And there is a world of difference between them. So anybody who finds my attitude about spanking a child as objectionable, screw you. You don't know what you're talking about. I do. So back to consequences. We have people flagrantly violating the rule of law in this country. Why? There are no consequences. Illegal blockades. Illegal blockades. They are illegal. On their very face, they are illegal. There is no discussion. They are shutting down the economy, shutting down the country. They're putting so many people who work on the railways, their jobs are at risk. Now they're looking at layoffs. People who rely on the goods that come via rail are being forced to go without, whether it's food or essentials like propane, heat, all because of some self-styled activists, air quote. And they do this thing because there are no consequences. We have politicians flagrantly breaking the law. No consequences. How many ethics violations has Trudeau been accused of? How many ethics violations and violations of common sense and of Canadian values could be laid at the feet of the Liberal Party? There's no consequences. I've been at rallies on I Stand with Pegida. I've said that before, Pegida Canada. And Antifa is out there in force, and the unions against us. The unions, okay, they're so loony left today, and just if they're not out and out communist in their viewpoint. But Antifa are masked. Now, I'm told that's against the law to show up like that, masked, in a disguise, wearing a disguise. Are they arrested? No. No consequences. Those people blocking the railway tracks, why are they doing this? It's not to stand with the Wet'suwet'en. That's bullshit. That's already been proven. There's money being funded in there. There is money going into this. Whether it's Tides Foundation or George Soros, I don't know, but there is money going into this. There is money going into Antifa. So these illegal assemblies, Al-Quds in Toronto, a big anti-Semitic hate fest, anti-Israel hate fest. Hate speech is illegal, and they practice hate speech. The assembly is not permitted. They do not have a permit for this assembly. But they do it, and they got away with it. Why? No consequences for illegal actions. I grew up when we had a government and a people with guts, with a spine. Now, give you an example, the Canada I grew up in, as soon as those blockades went up, the police would have been there in force, mounted units and ground units, and those blockades would have been broken up and those people arrested because what they did was illegal. Consequences. Al-Quds, get on the buses, go back home. This is an illegal assembly. You will disperse immediately or you will be arrested. I don't know if the police have water cannons, but get the fire department there with the fire trucks and blasting out that water from a 2-inch line. That'll get them rolling. Consequences. Teach them consequences. And I guarantee you, a lot of this would stop. Once they started going to jail, once they started getting hit in the pocketbook, paying fines, once they started, if they resisted, getting beaten by the police, they would learn consequences. But until we as Canadians realize again that the rule of law must prevail, as long as these people have no fear of consequence, this will continue. Oh, my poor Canada. Spineless politicians, like Toronto City Council, is a joke. spineless, gutless, ballless eunuchs who will not take positive action because of the optics. And so you have a city in disarray. Consequences. Spineless leadership at the federal level. You have a country in disarray. Consequences. The police, I would hate to be a cop today. One of my neighbors is a police officer. She took retirement. She'd like to have stayed on the force. She had her time, but she liked being a cop. She got out because of the politics. So what happens? The Metro Toronto Police Force has lost a good, dedicated, experienced officer. Why? Consequences. Consequences of weak leadership. Consequences of political paralysis. How are the optics? Fuck the optics. Take a positive stand. Why is Trump doing so well in the US? Because no matter what the press says, you look at the support he's getting, and I guarantee you, almost guarantee you, without some actual violence or extreme election rigging, he's back in the next election. Why? You've got a positive politician. Like him, hate him, immaterial. You have a positive politician with a strong moral center. And his attitude is, all of you, you don't agree, be damned to you. I'm doing what I think is best. You notice the people, the Americans, are gravitating towards that strength, that moral certitude that he projects. This is the best thing for the country. The detractors, the press, he just ignores them or just sloughs them off. We need to see, I've said this before and I've been flamed for it, we need a Canadian version of Trump. Someone with that moral certitude, with that kind of spine, who will sit there. And I think I would bet anything that if we had a leader come forward with that kind of positive, moral-centered message, who would not try to be all things to all people, if we had that, I think we would see a serious change in government. Other than right now, the Conservative Party of Canada, I can't see anybody who could pose a threat to the Liberals. And I've gone on before about the last election and the dirty pool the Liberals played. The lies they've told, Liberal lies, over and over again. The hypocrisy, I'm not going to go back there and revisit this. But they do these things, they lie because there are no consequences. Their hypocrisy is whitewashed by a compliant media. So again, no consequences. We've lost that ability to teach our young Canadians that negative actions yield negative consequences, but positive actions yield positive consequences. It's turned on its head, if you think about it. They're being taught that negative actions can yield positive consequences. In their eyes, positive consequences. If you're rewarded for illegal activity, that's a positive result from a negative, that's a positive consequence from a negative action. What kind of a message does that send? I don't know what to say. I really don't. This is about consequences. I'm still tossing things over in my head and talking with my friends, trying to nail down some of the other concepts I'd like to talk about. But just that one, consequences. Think about that. Like I said, a society that's getting turned on its ear, and a Canada that is being sold down the tubes. So if you love this country, if you truly love this country as I do, I would ask that you consider the consequences of your actions. Consider the consequence of your vote. Oh, that's Quebec now is looking at a shortage of propane. How much of Quebec went Liberal? Rail traffic now and supplies not getting to the East Coast. Who voted overwhelmingly Liberal? That's a consequence. You voted them in, you morons. There's the consequence of your vote. So let negative actions yield negative consequences. And maybe, just maybe, the lessons of this will start to sink in. But until they do, unless there is pain involved or severe inconvenience, they're not going to get the message. And we have to start teaching consequence again. Thank you. Have a good day.